1266th day of the war. Trump said a lot of beep at a press conference, but it is not followed that he is going to Alaska to give Ukraine to Putin. The Ukrainians and Europeans themselves will take care that this does not happen on August 13, 2 days before the meeting. They plan to talk to Trump and President Vance. NATO Secretary Mark Rutte assures that the meeting is only preliminary. In any case, no one will decide anything without Ukraine, and the supply of weapons will not stop at any result of the negotiations. In general, we will consider in detail what Trump said and why his words do not follow the fact that he is going to hand over Ukraine. We will talk about this in a minute. In the meantime, Ukraine continues strikes on the Russian defense industry. In Stavropol, the Monocrystal plant, which produces optical equipment, is attacked, including for the defense industry. In the meantime, the writing Shaheds sending notes about the attack on this plant under the threat of punishments is sent to the local media yesterday. As it is known, if there are no messages, then there are no attacks. Russian troops carried out a breakthrough in the Pokrovsk direction, almost reaching the Dobropillia-Kramatorsk highway. In deep state, they predict that Dobropillia can fall before Pokrovsk, and in Ukrainian armed forces they ensure that it happened only in the leak by small groups, which are now destroyed. We will monitor the development of the event, but I will say frankly, the situation is quite serious and close to catastrophic. Russian military on the front evacuates the wounded on horses and guards the ground robots, who should actually replace live soldiers on the battlefield. But in the Russian army, it is considered more expensive than the life of the fighters. This attitude leads to the fact that the Russian armed forces have to replenish the society with waste. A resident of Arzamas who assaulted a 93-year-old pensioner is now at war. This and much more in today's fresh report, which you can support with your like, comments, and subscription to the channel. Subscriptions are especially important for YouTube algorithms. So yesterday Trump held a press conference, initially to tell about his plans to clean Washington from housing and street crime with the help of the National Guard. By the way, understanding him a bit, last year I was in Washington. He hit me. It was much dirtier than New York, and there were, let's say, a lot of people who did something right on the street. Whether it is necessary to clean the National Guard or not, I do not know, but nevertheless, it is not the point. We do not break into American policy. He was immediately, of course, asked about the coming meeting with Putin and about the plans of peaceful regularization. Trump said as much concentrated nonsense as he did not say for a long time. It started with the fact that Trump said, as the ASTRA explains, talking about the future meeting in Alaska, he built the phrase, "I am going to conclude an agreement with Russia," going to deal, but did not say deal when to go to Russia. This is the Mr. Peace deal. Of course, this statement of Trump immediately became a meme, especially in the Z community. At first there, in general, it caused super agitation. I began to write, Michael, what, Trump will go to Russia? No, of course not, it's obvious, it's Trump. In short, it also became a reason for jokes that the exchange of territories which Trump was talking about will be about the fact that Russia will give Ukraine a number of captured territories in exchange for the return of Alaska. However, the author of the channel To Be or Not tried to look at the content of Trump's conference, and he got the following interesting impression. If you look at it in general, he writes, I don't have the feeling that he's going to give Ukraine up. I think he's got some kind of desire about whether he can achieve a beneficial deal, just to see if he can see that Putin doesn't need any deal at all and just uses it for his purposes. Next, I will give some quotes of Trump with comments on To Be or Not. Not all, otherwise it will be the only thing I can tell you about here. You can read the full version of the analysis, in fact, on the channel To Be or Not. So, during Bush, the Russians took a lot of territory. During Obama, they took a lot of territory. During Biden, they took everything. This is a matter of time. During Trump, you know how much they took. Nothing, Trump says. To Be or Not comment, here he is, proud that he did not give Russia territory. It does not sound like he is ready to give it to Russia. We have a good relationship with Zelensky, Trump said, but I do not agree with what he did. I very, very disagree. This should not have happened, but I will talk to Zelensky, and the next meeting will be between Zelensky and Putin, or Zelensky, Putin and me. I will be there if needed, but I want a vote for the meeting of the two leaders. It worried me a bit, Trump continued, that Zelensky said I needed conditional approval. He got the approval to go to the war and kill everyone, and now he needs approval to exchange territory. Well, he comments on a more obvious reason, that Zelensky didn't go to war and was not going to kill anyone. Russia attacked and Ukraine is defending itself. You don't need to ask for approval for self-reliance. Moreover, all positions are written in the Ukrainian constitution. And here I will add to myself that the approval of Zelensky, despite all this, still got and regularly updates it. The military situation and mobilization are brought to the Verkhovna Rada and extend it every time for several months, I think, for 3. It is logical that any peace deal should also be approved by the parliament, but also by the constitution of Ukraine for its change, also by the referendum. Russia occupied most of Ukraine, Trump said. They occupied some very important territories. We will try to return them to Ukraine. Again, he does not sound like a person who wants to just take and give something to Russia. They occupied, we call it the real estate of the ocean, Trump said. This is always the most valuable real estate that is in the river, the lake, or the ocean. I will not conclude a deal, not I will make a decision, but I think the deal should be concluded for both of them. Russia is returning to build its own country. This is a huge country, they have huge potential, but now they are doing well, they have problems with the economy, Trump said. On the TV, they write, not he will make a decision, he said it himself, and he pays attention to Trump's words. I gave them javelins, Trump sung his favorite song. By the way, not that someday we may talk about this. Trump did not want to give Ukraine javelins. This is a separate story, as one of the generals told about Trump trying to block this point. In short, okay, F***ck with him, look it up if it's interesting. I gave them javelins, Trump said. If it were not for me, all those tanks destroyed in the first days which were stuck in the mud some. Commander made a big mistake. They would already be in Kiev after 4 hours if they went along the road. The Russian general made a brilliant decision to go along the ground. They went along the farmland. Before that, they were stuck in the mud. I don't know who that general is, but knowing Vladimir Putin, he's no longer with us. Well, F***ks, this is nonsense. Or, as the saying goes, Russian troops were just moving along the routes, and here's what happened to them. I'll add, Colonel General Cheka, who led the offensive on Kiev from Belarus as the commander of the military group Vostok, ultimately held his post until July, after which an honorable message to Syria was sent. Since from the first day I cover. What is happening? I remember these columns they drove on the highway would fly to Rocktory, because then Russia did not have it yet to these points of the normal air defense system would fly to Rocktory. They took off the first tank in the colony and the last tank in the colony since there was dirt and mine around. They could not go anywhere. These columns were shot like in Syria. Therefore, what Trump says is not true at all. Absolutely nonsense, having no connection to the reality. But anyway, I'll look at what Putin has in mind, Trump said, and if it's an honest deal, I'll tell it to the European leaders and President Zelensky, and to Zelensky I'll call him first and then to the Europeans. And I can say, good luck, fight, or I can say, we can conclude the deal. And this is what the comment writes in the comment of Bitely. He says about the honest deal, it does not sound like he is ready to take Nabalova. I saw a request from Ukraine, Trump said. 88% of people would like to see a deal, and 3 years ago everyone wanted a war. Everyone wants a war until it does not start. Bitely writes that this is not true. 7.680% of Ukrainians act categorically against the transfer of territory to Russia. 37.5% are ready to accept the deal, in which de facto control of occupied territories will remain for Russia. No one in Ukraine has ever wanted this war. No one in the world wants it, and the end is more than Ukraine, and I, of course, agree with Bitely. Trump first came up with these numbers. At some point he came up with 4% of Zelensky, and then, as he showed further investigation, he took just some kind of Z channel and a random survey, like, in Telegram, survey is carried out sometimes, and here in the Z channel they carried it out, and he does it 4%. These 88 are also taken for no reason, from where, and at no time did Ukraine want war before the war and did not expect and did not desire war. Ukraine wants to live, just to live normally, calmly, so that Russia does not question it. Russia wants to destroy Ukraine. That's why it's very difficult to find a compromise between these two positions, you see. Asked Trump a question, what is your decision about a good meeting? Trump said, well, we'll meet in the first 2 minutes. I will definitely know whether we will have a deal. How will you find out, Trump? Because this is what I do, I make deal. Russia is a military nation. This is what they do, they fight. As my friend said, Russia is strong because they won over Hitler and also Napoleon. Bitely writes, especially for Trump, 3 small victorious wars of Russia in the 20th century. One is completely lost with Japan in 904, 905, and the other one ended with the first victory. In Finland, from 79 to 89, the USSR was stuck for 10 years, one of the factors of its subsequent collapse from 79 to 89. We talk a lot with Europeans, Trump said. They are beautiful people, beautiful leaders. And honestly, as one of them said, I have a predose from the attempt to regulate the situation in Ukraine. A bad statement, but true. They are tired of it. They want to spend money on their country again. We have great relations, you see for yourself, and they hope for me. If it were not for me, it would never be decided until the last living person asks whether or not he said it to Sorbin, because Trump really did not focus on him for several times. I will talk to President Zelensky. Trump summed it up. I will collect all all the ideas I am going to this meeting, filled to the limit, and we will see what happens. And the last one, and vitally writes, he does not reject the vision of Ukraine and Europe, and I will add for myself that this vision, I remind you, is that any deal should start with the ceasefire on the front line, and that the recognition of Russia's gains in the territory is legally impossible. And the last one, and vitally notes, it all was already in February-May. Ukraine has already passed through it all. But I will only say, and I will repeat it once more, that you need to hope for the better and prepare for the worse. I agree with vitally that Trump does not sound like a person who is going to hand over Ukraine. Once again, vitally and I are very skeptical about Trump. I consider him a degenerate, and vitally is not pleased with his intelligence. I believe that this is generally a curse that has been on everyone for a long time. First, it was a curse of Putin's form, and now it's Trump's form. Together, they are a double curse, and there is only a moose from them, and there is no predictability, no adequate actions. But nevertheless, Trump does not look like a person who will come to Alaska. I still can't believe that this meeting will take place, but this is my problem. I do not impose this opinion on you. Moreover, I do not have such an opinion that the meeting will take place. My opinion is that the meeting will take place, but my feeling is that it will not take place. You see how I mean? In short, I say that there is no feeling that he will come there and be like, yes, Vladimir, it is necessary for Ukraine to agree on everything, on your conditions. Now we will pressure Zelensky. In short, maybe they will pressure Zelensky because Trump loves doing this and he more likes Putin than Zelensky. He wants to be like Putin himself. He definitely doesn't want to be like Zelensky. And in this sense, of course, there will be some pressure, but so far it does not look like Trump is going to just accept all the conditions of Putin. There is a feeling that, I have more and more feeling that Trump and his other environment work according to the old American principle of fake it until you make it. Well, that is, you know how all such Witkoff understood Russia wrongly. And did he understand it wrong, or did he pretend to understand it wrong? Because this is a direct American thing. This is fake it until you make it. This is a phrase. It says that, how to say it, deceive until it becomes reality. That is, if Putin is not ready for anything, Trump announces that he is ready and let's meet. And here they are, they have already met, and Trump says, well, come on, agree. Putin says, well, we did not suggest this, but we have already met. What is this? Come on, or we will hit you with sanctions and everything else. Here, I think, is such a maneuver, Trump thought. There is a danger in this because Putin is a KGB soldier, such a quite cunning and quite pretentious, and Trump is a fool. But due to the fact that Trump is a fool, it is possible that this magic of Putin, which everyone talks about, will not work on him. We'll see, we'll live, we'll see. In fact, Europeans and Ukraine are preparing for the negotiations of Putin and Trump. Ukraine and European partners are not sitting down and waiting for Putin and Trump to meet. European leaders and Zelensky will call Trump on Wednesday. Germany will hold a virtual meeting of European leaders on Wednesday, August 13, to discuss how to pressure Russia for the sake of the war in Ukraine, according to Reuters and the link to the representative of the German government. The meeting, there is a telephone conversation with the President of the United States, Donald Trump. The first part of the conversation begins at 14 o'clock in Berlin, that is, 15 o'clock in Moscow. And it will take part, in addition to the Chancellor of Germany and MERS, the leader of Finland, France, the UK, Italy, Poland, the European Commission, and the European Council. Well as the President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, and NATO Secretary Mark Rutte writes to the policy. An hour later, 15 o'clock in Berlin, the European leader of Zelensky called the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the Vice President, J.D. Vance. Earlier, the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, said that the United States promised to consult with European leaders before Trump and Vladimir Putin's meeting in Alaska, scheduled for August 15. As you can see, Europeans and Ukrainians want not only to make their wishes come true, but also to advise Trump on how exactly it is possible to pressure Russia so that it may agree to calmly accept conditions for Ukraine. Let's see what comes of it. NATO will at the same time continue to supply Ukraine at any point in the course of the negotiations. A little bit of what is called calming in the right way. From the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte promised that the purchase of weapons for Ukraine will continue independent of the course of negotiations of Trump and Putin on Friday. I have no doubts Trump and Putin comment, or that Europe will not take the desire to buy weapons for Ukraine. The question will not change the readiness of America to sell it. Well, as of Saturday, Ben said that it is ready, so let's hope. In the rest, Rutte assures that the positions of Ukraine, Europe, and the United States agree that no one is going to conclude the deal without the help of Ukraine's interests, and so on. As much as the word Rutte is strong in this plan, we will see. Next, Vitally brings the following quote from the interview of the Rutte channel SBs. President Putin is still the main threat to the alliance. It is very good that President Trump protests it. We will see how far he can go to Friday when this process begins. He has the opinion that in Alaska we will see a moment like the 38th, when in an attempt to immediately stop the war, a fundamental for much more conflict was laid out due to large concessions that were made. Are you comfortable that Ukraine was removed from these negotiations? Rutte says that on Friday there will be a test for Putin. When it comes to peaceful negotiations, the ceasefire, territories, guarantees, and security for Ukraine should be and will be involved. But on Friday, it is important to see how serious Putin is, and the only one who can do this is President Trump. There will be no last word at this meeting, there will be no final deal. Trump will see how serious Putin is. If not, then everything stops here. If he is serious, the process will continue. Putin should be sated for the negotiating table in Zelensky. He cannot do all this through President Trump. After all, as Trump himself said, there should be a three-way dialogue in which Europeans should also be involved. We're all in the same positions, Americans, Europeans, Ukrainians, when it comes to the geostrategic positions of Ukraine in the future. In the scale of the Ukrainian army, the expansion of NATO on the eastern flank in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Poland, Putin absolutely cannot have voices in any of these questions. The question asks him, and who will provide Ukraine with a guarantee of security if not NATO? Rutte says, we all pray that there will be a moment when the fire will stop. If there is a minimum of fire stopping, then Europeans under the leadership of Macron and Starmer will discuss with the United States and NATO how to provide us with a guarantee of security. Question, what about the purchase of weapons from the US, from NATO, from the US? Do you plan to supply them without dependent on what happens on Friday? Rutte says absolutely. They continue. We have two first packages from the Netherlands and the Scandinavians. I am waiting for further announcements in the coming days and weeks, and this is critically important. In addition, the Europeans are investing in the Ukrainian defense industrial complex, and NATO coordinates all this from Wiesbaden so that Ukraine is in the best position as possible. Well, before we move on, I would like to remind you that you can support this channel not only with your like, comments, and subscription, but also financially. You can do this on Patreon, the link is in the description, or by buying NVPN, also by the link in the description. NVPN is a tool to bypass blocking, which allows you to bypass YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, blocked media, Discord. Well, in short, without VPN, it is now possible to imagine your life if you want a reliable, cool VPN with a good service support under which I take responsibility, which is called, then the link to the purchase in the description. In Russia, the purchase and use of VPNs still remains legal. Well, we continue. Residents of Stavropol report that the drone attacks an enterprise in chemical industry, one of the main suppliers of substratum for the optoelectronic industry, AO Monocrystal. In the frames of the eyewitnesses, the smoke is seen. According to the analysis of ASTRA, the photo is made at the restaurant Rostik on the prospect of Kulikov in Stavropol. On the same prospect is Monocrystal. The smoke on the photo is fixed directly over the enterprise, analyzed ASTRA. Monocrystal is one of the leading world enterprises in the production of artificial corruption, subferia, used in the optoelectronics, solar energy, and other high-tech sectors. As reported on the enterprise website, it is the daughter company of the multi-industrial concern, Energomer. Synthetic substratum is used in optical systems, protective elements, sensors, and lasers, including military equipment. It is also used in components of the aerospace equipment construction and other high-tech sectors, including the military sphere. As the ASTRA paid attention in May 2025, the Stavropol blog note reported that the Stavropol AO Monocrystal can kill the defense state order and go to court for theft of millions, thereby confirming that the enterprise is involved in the state defense order of the Russian Federation. As you know, if you ignore the problem, it will cease to exist, so the defense plant in Arzamas was sent to the Nizhny Novosti media, demanding that news be deleted about the attack of UAVs on it. About the receive of such a letter from the Arzamas device construction plant, about the gift to which I told you yesterday, was told on August 11 by the independent Nizhny Novosti channel, Sorokin Kvost. The press service of the plant was sent to the prohibition to publish data about the consequences of drone attacks. For the violation of the prohibition, the residents of the region are threatened with a fine of 1.3 thousand rubles. The officials are 10.3 thousand, the lawyers are 100.5 thousand. As for the strike statistics in Ukraine in July, the resource Shaheds tracker brings the statistics of Russian strikes on Ukraine with drones and missiles in the last month. A total of 261 strikes were recorded, of which 38 were due to the result of missile or combined missile-drone strikes. 111 fires took place and 12 power cuts took place, one of them being large. The resource Sakagar notes that the strikes are mostly concentrated in the prefrontal cities, although mass launchings took place under the rear cities of Ukraine. Apparently, the concentration of strikes in the prefrontal zone, including, leads to a decrease in the effectiveness of drone counter counterattacks, since such strikes have much less time to be shot down and suppressed. Well, now probably the main news of the front, which is about the tactical breakthrough of Russian armed forces under Dobropillia. Russian troops carried out a breakthrough in the Pokrovsk direction in the direction of Dobropillia. Deep state analysts told us about the events in detail. The post is long, but it is necessary to bring it to understand the situation. So this is what the analysts wrote. For the last several days, discussions and questions about what is happening in the area of Dobropillia, where the Moscow troops are actively moving forward, are being distributed online. At the moment, the Russian armed forces, with the help of constant pressure and a high number of infantry, have managed to advance to the settlements of Chasiv Yar and Zolotoy Kolodys, where they are leading the accumulated forces for further development of success. On their way, Moskwites are trying to secure themselves on the area, setting up positions. Also from Chasiv Yar, the Russians passed through the settlement of Veselaya, and they are also leading the accumulated forces there. In this village, about 24 enemy fighters have already been detected in the last day, Deep State wrote yesterday. At the same time, Russian armed forces are not stopping at the achieved and continuing to develop successes in the direction of the Dobropillia-Kramatorsk highway, strengthening in the area of Novodanovo and Petrovka. Unfortunately, the Russians have found weak places for further advance and will use them, taking such attempts. The situation is getting pretty chaotic, since the Russians, having found gaps in the defense, are infiltrating deep into the area, are trying to quickly secure themselves, accumulate forces for further advance, while some people in the command of one of the brigades either do not understand the depth of the problem or present the situation as controlled. In which everyone was killed, everyone was stopped. However, the military themselves do not agree with this, who hold the defense there and try to understand what is happening. The area of Zolotov Kolodys, Shakov, and other settlements in these vicinity is a place of the construction of new serious engineering fortification structures with high-quality engineering barriers. And most important, with officially set positions like army and company positions, which the enemy calmly bypasses and will later take over and use for his defense. As the military comments, the worst thing is that we will take them from there, if they take them. This is an example of the fact that, in addition to the well-constructed engineering fortification structures, people who will hold them are needed, as well as effective commanding which can effectively use such opportunities. The beginning of the path to Dobropillia and its logistics in Russia began with its control over it, using drones. Now the Russian armed forces have found places to put this physical path, completely realizing the consequences that this will create after achieving the goals. For them, there are already certain final points that they should achieve, and today they are implemented this plan, trying to completely occupy the golden well of Chasiv Yar, Veselaya, and other settlements. After the final fortification and storage of forces, attempts of advance in the depths of the territory will be necessary, as well as the drones crew, which will complicate the redeployment of alternative logistics and the holding of specific positions for the defense forces. With such a development of events, if it does not change, we can face the fact that Dobropillia will go faster than Pokrovsk, Deep State predicts gloomily. I will add for myself that the search for weak points in Ukrainian defense and the attempt to implement such a breakthrough is under the control of the entire Russian strategy of tactics, which I told in a recent video, so the fact that the breakthroughs have still managed to avoid the huge merits of Ukrainian soldiers. However, there is no ideal defense, so unfortunately it is not surprising that the Russian strategy, at least in one sector, has given its fruits. From the Ukrainian side, the situation is evaluated quite gloomily. In particular, this is what the Ukrainian military officer Stanislav Bunyatov writes. The situation in the Druzhkoy direction is really bad. I don't know whether this is a result of the policy of F***CKS** teaching the positions of the situation under control, the lack of people on the positions of the UAV crews, or everything together taken. Such breakthroughs are clearly a result of a not sober assessment of one's forces and resources, as well as of Russian capabilities. Russian armed forces do not appear from the air and do not make such breakthroughs at one moment. They were working. There were strikes from their positions, there were circumstances acting on such consequences in the near future, but they were not reacted to on time. This is already the fault of not only some separate brigade. This is a systematic problem which the Russians used very skillfully, used in their favor, Bunyatov concludes. Perhaps the most sharply expressed situation was from the head of the Azov, Bogdan Krotvich, who, let me remind you, resigned, using the right of a former prisoners of war to demobilize, which now allows him to say much more openly than the active Ukrainian officers. So this is what Krotvich wrote, addressing the President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. Mr. President, I honestly don't know what you are being reported on, but I inform you, on the Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka line, without exaggeration, full F***CKS are growing have been deteriorating. Every day for a long time, those commands that are now being designed or are already designed to fix the unbreakable are most likely to be accused of in the F***CKS that are already happening. There is no stable line of combat contact, as a stable line does not actually exist. Pokrovsk-Mianorod is almost surrounded, Konstantinovka is half the circle, and the enemy is moving in the direction of Kramatorsk and Druzhkivka. The problem has intensified since last year. This was publicly warned. That's how it all happened. The reasons for this problem are not newly created corps which have inherited a failed situation with subordinates not equipped with units and non-operative tactical or operational strategical groups which have effectively controlled nothing for the past year and a half, only sent orders in accordance with orders from the general staff. Systematic problem starts with wiping out of reserves, massive shrapneling of units along the entire front line, reports about the village taken like victory in the background, failures in whole directions, the spread of mobilization resources to commanders, as well as the absolute lack of a strategic and even operational vision of the theater of combat actions of the military leadership. I'm an officer and I have the understanding of honor. My conscience is clear. The report ended with all the officers who accepted the rules of the game. I don't understand what to tell you, says Krovich. Ukrainian Operational and Strategic Group of Troops NEPA, previously known as SGV, Horditsa, which in turn responds to the Pokrovsk direction, was given a post which more likely looks like an antichrist, but to bring it in still follows the official position of the Ukrainian command at the moment. So this is what the group channel writes. The Russian armed forces, constantly changing attitudes and ways of applying troops, use the number of benefits, not counting the large-scale losses of the personnel, are trying to slip through small groups past the first lines of Ukrainian positions. The infiltration of such groups, although it requires the involvement of reserves for their destruction, is not taking them under the control of the territory. This misunderstanding has repeatedly caused mistakes when analyzing the situation in the public discussions in the Pokrovsko-Myrnograd agglomeration area. Of course, the situation remains difficult, and the battles in this region are the most intensive compared to other areas of the border line. Nevertheless, Ukrainian troops are doing their best so that even those Russian groups which managed to infiltrate through the first defense line were destroyed in the shortest possible time, which is what is happening. We urgently ask you to take into account this and not spread information from unproved or fully informed sources, the military intelligence services of Dnepropetrovsk call. From my side, I note that the situation, of course, is bad. Literally all Ukrainian military write about this, while authoritative Ukrainian military and authoritative Ukrainian analysts Tars Chmut, Krovich, Deep State, Bunyatov. And their words, in my opinion, deserve much more attention than another official report by certain military groups. However, as practice shows, such Russian breakthroughs usually do not follow the collapse of the front, since the Russians begin to actively expand the flanks, afraid of Ukrainian counterattacks. This takes another significant time, which allows the Ukrainian forces to prepare new defense lines. Moreover, the problems with logistics from the Russian side have not been cancelled, and the support for front Russian units in the area of Tracia Dobropillia Kramatorsk has just increased by 10 kilometers. I will not say that I will definitely forget the familiar scenario in which the relative rapid Russian breakthroughs to the current times will change, but they will change by crawling offensive, but such an option is at least possible, so we will follow the development of events and continue to hold the Ukrainian army, which needs this support as never before. Nevertheless, once again, if someone looks at me from the Ukrainian leadership, including the army, I know that many Ukrainian soldiers look at me. Please pay attention to what the analysts say, to what the soldiers say, and let's say to the calls for personnel changes which they require, which they have been shouting about for a long time. It seems to me that time has passed. I think we will talk more detail with you today about this breakthrough, because this is the most discussed topic on the front line, since the Russian offensive for a long time, May and June, did not give any significant results for the Russian side, and now the middle of August, the day before the negotiations. I think this is also connected, and I think that Russia asked for additional forces and used everything that was, including the equipment that was accumulated in order to implement these breakthroughs, so we will talk about this in more detail in a separate video. So the situation, because the situation is really very, very bad, but Russian problems also do not go anywhere. The front does not end in the Pokrovsk direction, Deep State. It's about the advance of Russian armed forces in the area of Mayskoye, Severnaya Chasivaya. At the same time, the Ukrainian forces are still holding part of the city. In the last week, fighting continued in Chasiv and Nikolaevka, and in the area of Kakasnaya, the Russian military author writes, the telegram channel Temnya began to move in the direction of the North Konstantinovsk Dacha. It makes strikes on the new village of Kakasnaya, through which Ukrainians are trying to come to Podolskaya and Krasnaya. Why the Russians have not yet managed to take Chasiv Yar, it becomes clear if you listen to regular stories about the problems in the Russian 98th Airborne Division, which is responsible for the battles in the city. Military pensioner from the Lepensk region, Sergei, recorded a video address in which he expressed discontent about the fact that soldiers who are injured and are needed in medical care are being sent to the front again. According to him, this happens in all branches of the military. In addition, he reported that after the injury, it is impossible to replace them with positions because there is not enough personnel. Also, Sergei believes that citizens who have not received Russian civilization should be mobilized. Young guys who could build families, good families, but they were not given. To Putin, he blocked the way to life, to prosperity, to everything. In the second video, he wrote down the numerous requests of one regiment and friends from the 98th Airborne Division and Military Unit 15451, in which he told about a number of problems in the unit. Prayer for help, they are not sent home, they are not commissioned, that is, they want to be sent back for a tape. Some injured, sick people are not even sent to the Air Force, to be further sent to them for a tape, that is, for half-living military actions. They are fastened with handcuffs. I will show you this in the form of these photos. They're fastened with locks, chains, like dangerous people. According to Sergei, the commanders of such actions are trying to block the passage of the Air Force by all means, as there is no one to replace them. This is how the command of the 98th Division of the Air Force comes. So my friends, this is not the only case in which paratroopers of the 98th Division are asking me, who are half-living, before landing on the bus to be sent for a tape, take crutches, put them on the bus and they leave to fight, half-living. The man emphasized that the 998th Airborne Division is called the 998th Criminal Battalion, since the soldiers have no rights. About the fact that half of them die in hospitals, especially in Kostramsk, where they are not provided with any medical care, and therefore no actions are taken. They are not sent to the military command, they are not provided with any medical care, they are just presses, and people die. When I was dead in rehabilitation for 2 weeks from not providing help, 9 people died. The 100th Separate Mechanized Brigade of Ukrainian Armed Forces showed a video with an illustration of the use of the Russian army of ground robotic systems in a classic army way. This is how it was told about in the brigade channel. A person is not a drone, it is not a pity, it is not a secret that between the armed forces of Ukraine and the army Optical and Ordi are now going a rife about the development, production and use of ground robotic systems on the battlefield. True, the philosophy of use of these systems is diametrically opposite. Ukrainian armed forces use the NRK units as a way to preserve personnel lives, while robots are a real value for occupiers of Ordi. To make sure of that again, watch the videos filmed in the Toretsk direction, they write. The NRK units are sent to a mission, and the operator, instead of sitting in a safe shelter, follows him literally several dozen meters without letting him out of sight, in order not to lose sight. But this is not all. Another orc is going before the robot, of course, not at his own will, so that in the event of an unexpected situation, let's say a fire strike, take a strike on himself. As a result, this is what happens. The orc Pruvnik is immediately sent to the Concertkabzen and the expensive Iron Man remains whole. It is all the more strange that in fact even in the Russian army a person is not cheaper than a drone. The payments for the recruitment of contractors and coffins are much more expensive than any drone, including the ground one. However, as it is known, in the Russian military you cannot pay anything at all, announcing them to the missing people or to the people who left them themselves. For this, the Russian commander will most likely not ask, but to explain the loss of the ground drone and to write it down, so the Russian robot operators fight in this way. Of course, there are not enough ground. These conditions, the evacuation has to be carried out in exotic ways, including on horses. The corresponding video is brought to the Ukrainian journalist Yuri Budusov, who publishes a video address of a Russian soldier who asks to help buy a new horse as a replacement for the lost one. Friends, good day. We continue to give our soldiers material aid. Who has such an opportunity? Now I will post a video. We need to buy a horse for the evacuation of the injured. Since one horse died in the fight, the guys are asking to buy a horse. Who has such an opportunity, or you know where to buy it? Please contact us. Despite the rather curious video with horses, the Russians cannot underestimate. This is evidenced by the Russian video of distance mine of Ukrainian logistics with the help of Shaheds, which is so described by the Ukrainian channel Shaheds. The drop of the Russian Shahed, the anti-tank mines of the PTM-3, took place in the area of Stila on the border of Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The drone made several drops on the cars of the fighters of Ukrainian armed forces. It is confirmed that 4 cars were destroyed. The fact of the loss confirms the video on which the consequences of these drops are seen directly near Stila, Donetsk region. Use of PTM-3 from the Shaheds allows Russian armed forces deeply in the rear to distance mine the roads and strike the equipment. Separate areas of the Donetsk and partially Dnipropetrovsk regions are becoming more and more dangerous for movement, the author of the channel concludes. This is really a serious problem that can be solved only by increasing the production of interceptor drones and providing them with front brigades. Ukrainian brigades were allowed to buy pickup and quad bikes. Meanwhile, the forces of defense of Ukraine continue important and useful innovations. Vladimir Zelensky told about one of them. He made a bet, wrote for the president of Ukraine. A bet is such an extremely unit that conducts general leadership of the introduction of war. In Russia, he entered the First and Second World War, and now there is no such unit in Russia. Because there is no war, there is no special military operation. We discussed exactly those questions, Zelensky reports, which were raised by our soldiers on the front and which I provided the government officials with time to process. There is a decision. The first absolutely clear decision on pickup, quad bikes and other similar equipment, which will now be possible to buy due to the direct funding of the combat brigade. This will work as well as the means for the brigades to buy UAVs. We provide the opportunity to buy not only new pickup, but also those that have already been in use. This is what was said in every brigade. This week, the officials will make a decision in the documents so that this opportunity will appear in August. This decision is already more likely to be late. Cars on the front have long become a consumable. We have collected dozens of these cars, especially in conditions of constant use of drones. In fact, we are collecting the car competes with drones in cleanliness. We are just covering these drones with you. Thank you very much, by the way, the last fundraising we covered with you somehow. Very quickly in 2 days, the fundraising is for 1 million hryvnias. It seems to me that this is some kind of incredible result at all. Thank you all very much who took part in it, especially from the fighters, and now even some part of this load is removed from the shoulder of volunteers, which of course does not mean that the collecting of cars, including ours, will stop. As we know, according to the experience of buying drones under the same scheme, there are always not enough state funds. The second, continues Zelensky, provided a significant increase in funding for combat units so that it was fair, so that the brigades received really more capabilities. Updated rules, 7 million hryvnias in the brigade from the budget for each battalion involved in the combat actions, that is, the rate is at 10 million hryvnias. Logically, the means to buy transport should come from somewhere. Third, we significantly simplify and digitalize the writing of the property. The government will change the corresponding documents so that there are more opportunities for commanders of corps and commanders of brigades. We also reduce the writing time. This is also a very important, although not obvious, simple mortal moment. The settlements inherited from the Soviet army and the regulations do not reflect the situation when, as I said, drones and cars are in fact consumable. According to each removed Mavic, you have to write a paper keep and almost conduct an investigation to get a new one. Now, I hope it will really become easier and it will take Ukrainian soldiers and officers more time to actually do combat actions, as well as they will not have to save the funds given, primarily those same drones, to the detriment of the task. This is a problem that is much less in the Ukrainian army than in Russia, but nevertheless, its remnants and its aftershocks were, and a little more about the supportive disciplines in Russian troops. ASTRA found a 24th basement under Mariupol on the territory of the so-called LDNR, in which more than 200 Russian servicemen are illegally held there. Another illegal place for holding troops is in the village of Melykino in the Donetsk region of Ukraine. The relatives of the 3 held there by Russian servicemen reported this. An exact address of the conclusion is not established at the moment, but relatives assume that it can be one of the former hotel complexes. Lawyer Irina S. Bariati, nicknamed, told ASTRA that her husband, a contract soldier, served in engineering and reconnaissance forces since April 2024, has been serving in a basement in the village of Melykino in Donetsk region, about 20 kilometers from Mariupol. According to her, more than 20 people, including soldiers, are there with him. According to her, her husband voluntarily signed a contract with the military unit U-63411. For 7 months, he taught more than 9,000 servicemen how to use it and was awarded 2 medals. In October 2024, he arrived on vacation and then went to the 37th Brigade, another unit, 1605. In December, he suffered an injury during training and was exempt from training due to medical reasons. His mother then suffered an injury, and then went to the 37th Brigade, another. In 1605, in January he was accused of being self-reliant, though he was in contact with the command, and a week later he was sent to Ukraine, where, according to Irina, for 5 months he and other servicemen were used as free working forces to build work without payout. In June, his mother died at the hands of a contract soldier. The man was suddenly taken to the village of Melkin and placed in a basement. They are fed once a day. If they go to the toilet for the rest, there's a bottle there. It stinks terrible there. They don't wash, and the wipes are wet. My pets live in the best conditions, ASTRA Irina told. As her husband said, among the held ones are soldiers who refused to be sent to combat, who were also placed in a basement, and some of the prisoners were declared missing. At least 2 more relatives of the soldiers from Buryatia and from the 37th Brigade confirmed in ASTRA that their relatives are in the basement of Melkin. The last time Irina's husband called on July 9, he complained about complete indecency. Irina sent complaints to the military prosecutor's office, but there were no clear response to her appeal. According to Irina, the criminal case against her husband, once suspended by the command of the unit, does not allow for an investigation. All the servicemen with the relatives ASTRA talked to last time called on call more than a month ago. According to relatives, they were previously given a telephone call for a few minutes in the presence of military police once a week, but then the calls stopped. I tell this not for sympathy with this Russian soldier. If you want to kill Ukrainians in the Russian fascist occupation army, then how would you sign on all this yourself? I tell this in order for you to understand that you do not need to go there under no conditions, even if you are a dead man and you want to kill Ukrainians and wipe out Kiev from the face of the ground, and blah 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 blah, then you know that you will be at the place of your husband Irina. You will be in this basement, in the best case. In the worst case, you will be killed during the first assault. The coordinator of Russian communication in Troitsk, a healer of family values, beaten his wife and received 10 days of arrest. Nothing surprising about the representation of the so-called defenders of traditional values. Domestic abuse takes an honorable place in the list of these very values. It goes somewhere immediately after Beep. He was freed and accused of violation of his fundraising for help at the SVO. The coordinator of Troitsk and Russian communication, Stanislav Belou, since August 2, was arrested for 10 days under the Article 611. In a statement to him, his former wife filed a complaint with the Russian armed forces on July 17. After his release, Belousov recorded a video claiming that he accused the court of bias and destruction of the Russian Institute of Family, according to Chelyabinsk Budishivo. I actively received fundraising for humanitarian aid for SVO fighters, and it was during this period that we received a sentence for humanitarian aid. This was also not accepted. I accept the bias from the court and their decisions about my public activity, Belousov said. With the help of V-Contact, Russian media became known as the shooter of traditional Belousov's values. Since January, he has not been with his already dead wife, even though he has not started the divorce process. Russian media member Stanislav responded to a request for help getting to the house of his former wife, who was in the state of alcoholic drinking. In the car, the woman, who got angry at the sound, seized on his telephone, threw it out, and began striking him on the head. To ensure himself and prevent an attack, Stanislav was forced to hold her hands and kick them to bring her to sense. That's when it was presented as a failure, the community reported. Ruskoy Obchain shared information about the incident in the provocation media and the order company based on the organization's discretion. Earlier, it was reported that the secretary of the Intermediate Commission for the Anti-Extremism of the Troitsky district ordered the participants of Ruskoy Obchain to be identified, including in its chats, social networks, and messengers. Ruskoy Obchain representatives made the conclusion that officials have decided to announce their organization outside the law. I will remind you that Ruskoy Obchain are such absolute asterisk who lie about everything, who calmly silence when people die due to their actions, who hunt not only migrants, but also everyone who does not look like someone with a slavish appearance. They hunt those who, in their opinion, are drug trafficking, set fire to protons, and so on. Well, it is such a dump of dumps, and naturally the dump is sucky, which, when the case comes to some case, begins to tell that I am not me, the cow is not mine. Well, you see how he held his wife in hand to escape the DTP, we believe, and so on. On their commission with the violation of the norm of law, they made the decision that the Russian community allegedly is an unacceptable organization of extremist meaning, the report of the Russian community said. What it is, of course. In response, the administration of the Troitsky district said that the reason for the official statement became spread in the social networks of information that can cause concern among the residents of the district. Extremely interesting story, of course, happens in the regions of this very Russian communique, which seems to support the goal of the so-called SWO, to cooperate with the police of the Kremlin during raids on migrants. But at the same time, it turned out to be extremely inconvenient for the authorities, as in principle, any form of self-organization is not fully under the control of the Kremlin, or which is going out under its control. The Russian state has an old and strong symbiosis with neo-Nazis. The old ones remember born. Now it is possible to mention the fighting under the wing of the neo-Nazis group Espanol, but something did not work out here. However, nothing new. In fascist states, it is accepted to periodically clean the assault troops who fought back, not in the military sense, but in the Nazi sense. Let's remember at least the night of long knives in Germany and when the leadership was headed too independent from. Well, let's remember, of course, the DPI. I think who remembers? The resident of Arzamas assaulted a 93-year-old pensioner. The security forces suggested that he go to war, of course, to avoid punishment. He agreed, such a new elite. ASTRA found out on July 24, the 93-year-old resident of the village of Matovo-Volovo in Arzamas, Nizhny Novgorod region, reported that he raped her. And later, according to suspicions of BIP, the pensioners previously detained the accused, including for forceful BIP actions of Ivan Yakovlev. Criminal charges were initiated against him for BIP, but the security forces suggested that the detained be sent to war. So Ivan can escape the responsibility for BIP of a 93-year-old woman. I don't even have it in my head. I don't understand how this could be done. What could be in Pashka? Let's hope the drone will kill him faster, because such white garbage is not a place on this planet at all. Yakovlev agreed to sign the contract, the sources of ASTRA reported, familiar with the case. In June 2024, Russian police researchers regularly offer the detained, suspected, and accused to exchange for escape from punishment for a crime, to go to the SVO, reported ASTRA, and many other buildings. The same suggestions come and go. Well, Michael Nacke was with you, and see you soon. All the best, bye.